13 minutes past 8. Welcome back to Sunrise Daily. Well, we'll switch over. It's the same thing technically, talking about public-private participation or partnership, if you will. Well, joined now by Malam Murtala Aliyu, who is the Deputy President, Nigerian Institute of Quantity Surveyors. He was also former Minister of State for Power and Steel. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you.
Well, I know that, of course, there's a lot of optimism about this privatization, but one thing that clearly just pops up is capacity of the private sector. I mean, from what you've seen, you've been Minister of State for Power and Steel. Oh, by the way, there are some questions about power and steel, but in terms of capacity, where do you see the private sector rank such that they could participate properly and, of course, give a lot of results in public-private partnerships?
Well, thank you. The private sector as it is now definitely has a weakness. But the field is not localized. It's global. And there must be collaboration between the local players and the international players. And this is why we expect that whatever it is that we're going for, works. We don't expect that just the local capacity alone be engaged for the privatization.
Also, there were some people who were raising questions earlier while we spoke with Mr. Dickey about the power and steel sector. Straight away, Ajaokuta will pop up. Why are we having so much challenge with Ajaokuta?
Ajaokuta is a complex thing, really. In the first place, the conception of the project had, it conceived during the communist era when there was communism and capitalism fighting during the Cold War. And I think Ajaokuta was supposed to be almost like the second largest plant in the world. And in it, there are so many components that became a huge liability. If you unbundle Ajaokuta today, you are probably going to have between 15 and 20 standalone companies, that will run on their own. So all this now, task the actual purpose of steel making. You have the steel sector, you have a number of downstream activities like the billet plants, the steel rolling mills, the flat sheet. You have a power plant that has a capacity of 110 megawatts. You have a seaport, or rather river port. You have huge transport system. You have rail line and so on. So it's a complex project. And I think when government took that kind of decision, it was a period when government funded all projects. And this is a time when, the government has limited resources at least to put into this kind of projects. So Ajaokuta XLU is one example that should show a good sign of PPP. If I would suggest that the companies should be unbundled and be privatized separately, and each one becomes a standalone company to support the other.
But, but before then, I mean, since we've had a lot of challenge with getting the work, is there some sort of international collaboration to frustrate that plant from taking off?
The fact of the matter is, I don't think so. There's this story that the Americans don't want that, the Russians, and so on. At one stage, the company was supposed to be sold to an American company, Solgas. And I think all the processes were done. I left office when the matter changed. I can't honestly tell you exactly what happened. But I know at the time we were in office, there was the process of selling to Solgas. Later on, I learned it was sold to some Indian company and so on. The issue of sabotage, I think it's not really realistic as far as I'm concerned.
You're aware that every time public-private partnership comes up in conversation, a lot of people have different ideas about what it is, and they usually develop cold feet somewhat because they think there is a way government is shirking its own responsibility and that it's shifting the burden, as it were, to the people to pay. Do you think that is the case?
You see, there has always been collaboration between the public and the private sector. I mean, take the case of the social sector. The missionary schools actually was a collaboration. At least I know in northern Nigeria, the governments, support building the schools and sometimes even, underwrite some of the expenses of the missions. And in the health sector too, there are hospitals that are run by missionaries, with government support and so on. So there has been collaboration. Now what happens is in the economic sector where you went to concession a whole sector out, and people complain. The truth is that people must understand that utilities, are supposed to be bought and used, and there are certain things that government should concentrate on, and not utilities, not provision of roads, not provision of power, not provision of such things. They can lay down the regulatory, framework. They can also give some concessions to support that, which will now lower the eventual prices of these utilities.
So what then will government provide if you say that they shouldn't concentrate on the provision of road, power, and you name all those facilities?
I'm not dismissing the whole platinum, that they should just hands off. No. I'm saying that government alone cannot. With the current infrastructure estimate of 2.9 trillion gap, I don't see how government can raise that in the next 100 years. So the private sector must come in. So now it's a balance. There are areas where it can be economic to go straight outright for privatization. The areas where government will provide support. But it's, to be honest, to load everything on government, it's unlikely that it should work. So I'll give you an example. Take the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. By the time you concession it and you get it done, you have 3 lanes going either way. The economic activity will increase, not only in Lagos or in Ibadan end, along the line on Ogun State, and all the community along that line. There will be things will spring up. And a lot of things will happen. But
a host of people say it's not because oftentimes, considering the example that you've given, it's not because government doesn't have the capacity to, but because it lacks the sincerity too. Because we've also seen situations where monies are budgeted, sometimes spent, and really nothing is done.
I'll be honest with you. I don't think government has the capacity to provide this infrastructure gap. I don't think so. As for budgets and performance, I think that's a different discussion. And you can see, I think even this morning I saw that the National Assembly was saying the performance is not beyond 40%. So the issue is not about the capacity to provide, but the issue is delivery. And I don't think governments should bother themselves about delivering huge infrastructure projects now. They should build the mechanism to allow the private sector to do that. You can give some concessions, and support, and the environment, that will get that accessible.
But what can you tell us about this? Because you've just said government doesn't have that capacity. But from what people see, rather than government, first of all, yes, admitting we don't have that capacity, but let the best qualified ones just come on board and do some of these things. But the impression that people have is that they also want to meddle in who emerges as the PPP company that takes over and delivers some of those things. What, have you heard about such complaints?
Well, it's possible that happens. I think that's why, personally, I believe you need a strong but small government.
Strong but small?
Government, yes.
How?
A strong state with capacity.
Okay.
Not this huge ministry of this, department of that, and every day. Yesterday I saw that some pension transition board is set up. We are expanding the state, to unwieldy size. We need to narrow it a bit and then make it effective, and so that it can regulate properly.
Does that mean, in our own case here, reducing the capacity or yes,
the
size of the center?
Yes. And
let the states be a lot more stronger so that they can develop their states.
When I'm talking about state, I'm not talking about, say, Lagos State. I'm talking about the state itself as a structure, the governments. Even the state governments should actually reduce, their sizes and let go quite a number of things.
Okay. You're also, I mean, Deputy President of Institute of Quantity Surveyors. Yes. Have they been busy? Because, I mean, now that you have a lot of these initiatives, the private sector are supposed to come on stream, then there's a lot of employment going on there.
One of the major challenges professionals have in this country is that there is under patronage. I don't know whether it's a confidence issue or such, but even Nigerian consultants or Nigerian professionals, sorry, are involved in quite a number of things. The situation may be different, and I think that moving towards the private sector play, probably more and more expertise from the local resource pool would be used.